I'm Che, and I wanted to share with you our Agile journey where the Executive Action Team and the Executive Meta Scrum team really made the difference. I work with a government IT department, and I lead the Agile transformation journey there. So it all started running smoothly. We had a consistent number of projects and requests coming in, and we had enough development teams processing them and getting them out in a consistent manner. Then, of course, things changed. With the advent of mobile technologies and cloud computing and every other thing that changed across the globe, we had many, many requests across all the verticals of the government. They all wanted to update their websites, create new digital transformation, and serve the public much better in this digital world. It ended up being about 40 different departments, each with their own mission statements, and many times each with their own audiences as well. So it posed a significant challenge. It resulted in demand just streaming in. We ended up with 50 some odd projects simultaneously, and of course our teams were overwhelmed. We of course reacted to that like many other companies would. We doubled our staff. That resulted in over 60 simultaneous projects and barely any change in the production levels. So again, looking at the industry trends, we said, okay, let's try Scrum. We sent everybody to Scrum training. All the members of the teams came back as newly minted product owners or Scrum Masters or development team members. And after 2 years, there was very little change. Of course, that started a lot of the comments of, oh, well, Scrum may work, but we're different here. Or, it works in private industry, but not in government, too rigid. Except for one team. This small team of 5 members created the healthcare intranet used by 6,000 users day in and day out. They showed a visible backlog, and they started measuring their velocity, and the stakeholders were regularly involved in their processes. Of course, our CTO saw that and asked, how do we scale that team? We started by forming the Executive Action Team, who came up with the transformation plan. We developed it together, and the Executive Action Team was the one who communicated across the entire organization, setting the intention of what we wanted to accomplish. Our reference model was 7 teams to start with. The transformation strategy started with each team going through a relaunch workshop that went over 3 days. In those workshops, we discussed the team's memberships, the skill levels, as well as the width of the skills on the team. Each of the workshops had common milestones that each of the teams needed to hit. However, they were free to take their own approaches as to how they met those milestones. There was a significant amount of fear, of course, with this kind of a shift. Part of the fears came from the stakeholders. They were complaining that because we took the teams offline for a 3-day workshop, there's going to be a lost productivity, and they said, we already have so many things in flight, how are we going to keep up with the demand? The second source of the fears actually came from the teams and the managers themselves. Like many other large organizations, this was not the first transformation effort that was attempted. So the trust level for these kinds of transformation efforts, was shaky, of course. This is where the Executive Action Team really made a difference in managing those fears. Instead of just producing emails and flyers and posters about it. The team members themselves actively acknowledged with the people who were voicing these fears. They acknowledged, say, yes, we have gone through these things before. Yes, this sounds like the latest fad to go through. And this is the way that we're going to approach it, and this is why we think it's going to be different. They also encourage a lot more feedback from the participants themselves. We saw some immediate gains right after the relaunches. All the teams had visible backlogs and established a good Scrum rhythm, and they used yesterday's weather in order to measure their velocity. The teams accelerated really quickly, and a cumulative result was that we had a 540% increase in the number of effort points and items that we were delivering after each sprint. Of course, that exposed a different sort of issue. All the teams ended up clearing their backlogs of high-value items in about 3 sprints. Oops. So the executive action team had to scrum our transformation plan. We discovered that the product owners, the project managers, had a bit of focus challenges. They attended so many meetings because, again, there were so many departments vying for their attention that there were so many projects, so many new requests. It ended up a kind of a scattered approach, not sure which one to focus on first. So they ended up trying to do everything at once, and of course that resulted in nothing. The solution for the lack of focus was the formation of the executive Metascrum team. The deputy CTO, senior management, and the POs got together, and we implemented a new exercise. If you can only work on one thing in the next sprint, what would that be? And the other thing that we use to augment that is to encourage them to use the team's actual velocity to forecast the delivery of, instead of guessing at the time necessary. That, of course, met with some initial resistance. And that makes sense because the product owners had habits that really made things successful for them up to this point. So the executive action team, again, had to manage those fears, saying that, yeah, it's okay. It's not that what you were doing was wrong. We want to just do things a little bit better this time and help everybody accelerate. The exercise that we ended up doing was actually creating a physical roadmap of all the products and using Post-its in order to show when each increment was going to be delivered given the amount of effort estimation. And being able to physically see this on a wall, it really set the evidence right there in front of their faces all the time without being hidden by a mouse click. So it really helped the decision-making process. So wrapping up, some key organizational changes was, of course, the executive action team. Without them, we really would not be able to make any real progress. And this effort would have landed just like any other transformation effort, just wishing for change. The executive action team also scrummed the transformation plan because, as we know, we start with a good plan, but as learning comes in, we have to adapt to these new changes. That led to, of course, the executive Metascrum team, which turned a haphazard approach to all the many different requests that came in, and we turned it into a visible strategic approach. Some process changes that made a difference. With the executive Metascrum team, we use a deliver now, cancel it, or deprioritize the projects. And that kind of approach really reduced all the active projects from 60 down to about 15. We now forecast it with velocity, so instead of guessing at the timeline it would take to deliver this, we used the evidence that was shown instead. And the last key learning really was the visibility. Again, instead of hiding things behind a screen or a mouse click, we started posting things across the wall, things like the sprint burn down, the impediments that each team was experiencing, and the product roadmaps that forecasted the completions. By doing that, it remained in front of everybody's faces, and it really helped the decision-making process. So that's it. Thank you very much.
How did you get buy-in to the relaunch of the teams? From the teams themselves as well as the leadership to spend the time on it?
Yeah, the teams themselves were the easiest part because they were, of course, voluntold by the management to do that. It actually, so thinking back to the whole experience about sending everybody to Scrum and Scrum training, and then it takes, after 2 years, like nothing much has changed. That really set the frustration levels of the management and just kept ratcheting it up. So by the time they actually engaged me, I was the one who actually was working with that one team that was increasing that velocity. So of course, by the time their frustration levels hit a certain point, they said, hey, help. So it was actually kind of easy at that point.
What did you learn when Scrum was initially not working? Like what happened 2 years before?
Yeah, so what happened before? Why wasn't Scrum working? It's actually one of the things that I love hearing, there was a phrase that was used, we're different here, just like everybody else. Because honestly, what we experienced was what the industry has shown all the time: bad Scrum, implementing bits of Scrum, not focusing on the goals of the events themselves, not time boxing, is a huge thing. All those things really, and of course the prioritization of lack of prioritization, really messed things up for them.
Your teams now finish or complete their backlogs really quickly. Oops.
Yes.
How did you accelerate refilling their backlogs?
That was the toughest part, to change the thought processes from plate spinning, because everybody, all the different departments, especially in government, says, hey, this is for the citizens' good. This is going, it's so important. We need to do this now. It wasn't until we created a 6-sprint forecast using the team's velocity for the product owners. And that actually was the big thing that made the difference in their thinking. Because without that, it was just waving, everything was hidden, waving their hands, saying, oh, we think we can complete it, this, that, or the other. But when we actually posted it on the wall and said, oh, remember this project that's going to take X amount of points to deliver? Well, you really can't start the next one until way down here. And the huge resistance there is like, well, maybe we can have half the team work on, 2 projects at once. But of course, at that point, it's like, well, you're going to split their velocity, and create 2 different teams. So having that sort of evidence really was integral in changing that flow. So, yeah. Cool.
Che, if you had it all to do over again, if you were starting again from the very beginning, how do you think you'd introduce things differently? It sounds like things worked out, and that's great. Mm-hmm. But how would you avoid some of the pitfalls that you encountered?
More ramp-up time, I think. It was the transformation process started not really on a whim, but very, very quickly. The CTO was challenged with, hey, by the end of this year, he wanted to see this kind of change. And by the time he and I started to talk, it was like midway through the year. So having a little bit more ramp-up time to get the team schedules aligned, to communicate a little bit better, and maybe to walk the teams through what we expect the process is going to be. Because like I mentioned earlier, the teams were pretty much voluntold to go there. So half of them were looking forward to it. The other half, of course, were dragging themselves in there. But yeah, it worked out, and I think that a little bit more communication and a little bit more ramp-up communication would have made a lot of difference.